Hello, my name's James Allum, and today I'm going to be presenting my research on the fracture of 3D printed micro-tensile specimens, with a particular focus on the filament scale, geometry-induced anisotropy. This work's been undertaken with my PhD supervisors Andrew Gleadall and Silberschimdt at Wolfson School of Mechanical and Electrical Manufacturing Engineering at Loughborough University. Typically, in material extrusion additive manufacturing, a polymer filament is fed through a heated nozzle in the printhead and deposited onto the print bed below. The printhead moves to the X, Y, and Z axis, which results in the part's geometry being a physical embodiment of the toolpath, and this results in the layer-by-layer build characteristics seen in the image on the right-hand side. Due to the layer-by-layer manufacturing characteristics, we find that parts demonstrate mechanical anisotropy, where we have a higher mechanical performance in the plane of the extruded filament, as shown here by the green arrows, and a reduced mechanical performance in the direction of the interface between the extruded filaments, as shown here by the blue arrows. Many of the existing studies have cited that an insufficient bond formation between the filaments is the cause of mechanical anisotropy in material extrusion additive manufacturing. As this diagram demonstrates, the bond formation begins by the deposition of one filament on top of an existing filament. We then see a surface rearrangement, followed by a bond wetting stage. We then see the diffusion of polymer chains across the interface, which results in the formation of the bond. The aim of the present study is to identify the extent to which filament scale grooves influence mechanical anisotropy in 3D printed parts. The majority of existing studies have considered the influence of manufacturing parameters such as the nozzle temperatures on bond formation. There are currently no specific testing standards for 3D printed parts. As a result of this, many of the existing standards have used geometrically complex structures to test mechanical performance. Many of these have significant thermal and geometrical complexities. We set about reducing these by developing a new micro-tensile dog bone specimen, which was comprised only of individual extruded filaments. This enables us to control the deposition sequence. As shown in the image in the center here, the sequence is symmetrical, and we're able to control the volume of deposition in order to achieve a cross-sectional dog bone geometry. The present study utilizes PLA polymer. The other manufacturing specifications can be seen in the table on the right-hand side. In order to characterize the mechanical performance of the filament direction versus the interface direction, we derive specimens from two different hollow box geometries. The blue on the left is a filament direction specimen, and as you can see in the hollow box, the dog bone is in the direction of the filaments, whereas over on the right, the red specimen is for testing the interface direction, and the specimen is derived such that the dog bone is in the interface direction. The specimens otherwise are generated with exactly the same manufacturing parameters and with the same geometries. To identify if the filament scale grooves in the Z direction were responsible for reduced mechanical performance, we decided to mimic the geometry found in the Z direction specimens into the F direction specimens, and that is shown in the image in the center here. This was done using a surgical blade, and the grooves were incorporated in 5 locations on each face of the specimen. Additionally, we tested a filament non-groove specimen for comparison. By direct comparison of the filament grooved specimen and the Z direction specimen, we would be able to find out whether the interfacial weakness was the responsibility of the geometrical influences of the groove, or whether the interfacial bonding process in the Z specimen was the cause of its weakness. In each case, 6 specimens were considered. In one of our recent publications on the fracture of 3D printed polymers, we utilized notched specimens rather than dog bone specimens to compare the mechanical performance of the filament direction non-grooved, grooved, and Z direction. We identified significant differences in the fracture surfaces of the specimens, particularly with respect to the filament non-grooved as compared to the other two specimens. As can be seen on the left image, we have a significant formation of shear lips in the filament non-grooved specimens, which are not present in the filament grooved or the Z direction specimens, because obviously the region is not present naturally in the Z direction specimen, and in the grooved specimen has been removed manually. When we consider the load displacement of one specimen of each variety here, we see that there is a significant difference between the Z direction specimen and the filament direction non-grooved specimen. However, the manual incorporation of grooves into the filament direction specimen has the effect of significantly reducing its load and displacement, such to the extent that it now resembles, quite similarly, the Z direction specimen. When we consider the load-bearing area of each of these specimens, we find that the manual grooving of the filament direction specimen results in it having a similar load-bearing area to the Z direction specimen, and this is significantly reduced compared to the load-bearing area of the filament non-grooved specimen. The grooving also has the effect of reducing significantly the plasticity, and as we showed on the previous slide, the plasticity in the filament non-grooved specimen is likely derived from the presence of shear lips. Further evidence that the geometry is responsible for the reduction in performance of the Z specimen is shown here, where we see the mean strain-up fracture of the specimens. The filament non-grooved specimen, which, as previously mentioned, has the capacity to shear lip, is showing significantly increased strain-up fracture capacity compared to the filament grooved specimen, which now resembles quite similarly the Z specimen. This is replicated in the toughness calculation, where we again see that the introduction of grooving has the impact of reducing the filament direction toughness to that of the Z specimen. While the load-bearing capacity of the specimens was shown to be different, the tensile strengths were shown to be equivalent. This is strong evidence that the interfacial mechanical performance is equivalent to the bulk filament. As we can see in the microscopy on the right-hand side of this image, we've utilized the load-bearing area to calculate the strengths. The methodologies that I've discussed in this presentation are also utilized by my colleague Amir in another presentation at this event. So if you have an interest particularly in biomedical applications of 3D printed parts, please have a look at his presentation as well. To conclude this presentation, the specially designed single filament specimen that we've developed enables far more fundamental analysis of mechanical performance in 3D printed parts, which previously has been limited due to the more complex geometries that have been utilized. We were able to identify, using our specimen, that the natural grooves at the interface and those manually incorporated reduced the load-bearing area, which resulted in a reduction in load-bearing capacity. Both naturally occurring and manually incorporated grooves caused a reduction in strain-up fracture and toughness capabilities and led to sudden fracture. The interfacial strength in the Z specimens was equivalent to that of the extruded filament strength in the F direction specimens, which further supported that the presence of geometrical limitations in the region of interface is the cause for their reduced load-bearing capacity. The filament scale geometry is responsible for the reduced mechanical performance. It is not caused by poor diffusion or poor interfacial bonding, as has commonly been presented in the past. I will be including the results of today's presentation in a conference paper. I would also like to point you in the direction of two of the recent publications which I've made reference to during this presentation. And if you wish to contact me, then my details are available here. Thank you for your attention.